What's up, dudes? HW here. It's another beautiful morning. Beautiful morning up in Nashville. Yeah, it really is. So today we're talking about, we've been talking about cheap guitars, right? We've been talking about cheap guitars and good guitars, and we had some Fesleys in the house, and I was really impressed with those because that was cheap guitar seemed like they had done some upgraded pickups, They had upgraded to the Chinese-made Grovers, the G2 Grovers, but they're great. They're holding tune great. And then they have the Wilkinson Trem, which reminds me a lot of that Godot 510 that I'm a big fan of on the Sirs. And they had these sort of entry-level Wilkinson pickups. And I thought they sounded pretty good. What's funny? We hold things to these standards that I think are really beholden to ideas that existed in the past. What does a good Strat sound like? And that is an interesting question, because we have in history some variances when it comes to Stratocaster sounds. And you see different genres sort of gravitating towards those things. Let me give you an example. A 1950s Tele, there used to be a saying, the best Teles sound like Les Pauls, and the best Les Pauls sound like Teles. And if you've ever played like any of those Fenders, they're like the modern ones with like the broadcaster pickup in the bridge, it's a fat Tele bridge. And I hear how it's like the fatter that Tele gets, it gets like fat Tele, and then the lower wind and clearer a Les Paul bridge gets. Those things are moving together. And you really could trick someone with the right setup. There's an old saying out there too, nobody ever sold more Les Pauls than Jimmy Page's Telecaster. Because Zep 1 is all a Tele. But then Jimmy, when he went on the road, it was all Tele and a little Fender. I think it was a Princeton, right? And Steve Perry, Steve Perry? Yeah, Aerosmith. Joe Perry. Joe Perry, I think their first record is all a deluxe on 10, but those are two good examples of, like Jimmy Page hit the road and he was Mr. Marshall on the Les Paul, but nobody ever sold more Les Pauls than Jimmy Page's Telecaster. I always love that. But you play one of those broadcaster pickup sets and they're real fat. I really like them for that reason. I don't own one right now. But then you get the more 60s Tele sound, and it's a little more cutting, it's a little thinner, the Telecaster becomes that. And it's funny, CBS did that. Really, I don't think because they had some like, we need to change the sound. They just, over the years, changed things, but a lot of it was cost cutting. A lot of the changes in the amps got down to cost cutting, and maybe the guitars got that way too. I really don't know as much about why production changed in the pickups. as I do about, maybe why the wood changed. But definitely there were changes in wood and body styles, and glued together multiple piece bodies were for cost cutting measures. I bring that up because what's really interesting to me about that is sometimes you make a change and it's appreciated, and sometimes you make a change and it's not. And we know that there was a lot of changes in Fender guitars through the years. A lot of it had to do with cost cutting. Gibson the same way. But as time goes on, we don't view those as cheaper. We just view them as a little bit less vintage, right? So I think there's this huge premium on some of these guitars right now, and they were cheaper guitars. They were being manufactured not to as great a standard as they were prior. But all of that, like, perception has been erased. And so it brings me to, talking about these Fesleys, talking about this thing. I'm playing a 90s Squire made in Korea today, right? And it sounds great, but it kind of sounds great because it has these Lambertone triple shots in it. In fact, I think that's really the only reason it sounds great, to be honest with you. But it brings up this thing where it's like, hey, that guitar has these like starter Wilkinson pickups, or like the cheapest Wilkinsons you can buy are in that guitar. But they're Wilkinsons, right? And that sort of has a brand name. I find myself more attracted to that than maybe if you told me, hey, there's another OEM pickup that's made in the same factory. But I listen to those pickups, and there's things I like about them, things I don't like about them. Is it a better sounding Strat than if they put OEM pickups in it? I don't know. There's actually a lot of stuff I don't like about those pickups. I don't think they sound terribly classic, but they sound musical and they sound different, right? You could hear it in my last video. Whereas these are pickups that I would say sound really good, and that gets appreciated because they're different. The difference in the Lambertone kind of has like a reputation for clarity, for brightness, and I think you can hear that. But those are qualities that people seek out because these are more expensive pickups, That is a bright, beautiful, clear Strat neck pickup, right? In between sound. Right? You get what I mean? That, to me, that's very like Corey Wong. It's very like really great for the funk stuff. Really great for a lot of things. Middle pickup, never used it before. No idea what it sounds like. By the way, I went right to the 4 position. This is back to an out of phase. I missed a whole string there. Did you see that? Don't tell anyone. No, middle pick. I'll go back to it. It sounds like this. And the bridge, I'll put on a little drive for this sort of thing. Just a little screaming. I'm really partial to like this sound right here. It's like a Strat, but extra punchy clarity. Extra punchy clarity. That's what I like about these pickups. It's funny. It's one of those things where like you sit here and you go, I love this, but you could totally have a track where you would want something else, You might want really thick, really big, and you might listen to something else and go, hey, there's a strange sort of, there's a really like almost exaggerated out of phase quality in these cheaper pickups over here. That could be good for something. But all these, guitars, they have like their different sounds, I think in part because of the wood, but it's really because of the pickups, right? And so I might buy a cheap guitar and be impressed by they put these pickups on, and that makes it great. And this is a perfect example of that. This guitar, you might have seen this in another video we did that kind of got made a little viral. $40 Strat versus the $4,000 Strat. And that video is a little bit silly because this is a $40 guitar that was purchased off Marketplace, which I think brings up a whole nother point, which is like, where is the very best deal for guitar? Like for guitars. Probably on Marketplace in these like, you find yourself a Korean-made Squire. The person selling that is probably not a guitar player. They're probably just like, it's got strings, it's still available. I mean, that's the only information you're going to get, right? And so there's like great deals out there. But you take a guitar like this and you put on these pickups, right? You go buy like a $250, $300 pickup set. And it really will sound every bit as good as whatever else is out there, as whatever Fender's making in the custom shop. It really will. Now, you have to sit here as the player and go, do I like this $40 guitar? This guitar is very solid. I would not use the trem. I just wouldn't. It's decked right now, so it's nice and stable with the tuning. I don't think it's much of a looker guitar. But in terms of sound, because of these pickups, beautiful, wonderful. And you got to be honest with yourself. You're in this thing for $340, I think. I don't know. What is a set of Lambertone? What does a set of these cost? Okay, the triple shot set, which is what you're hearing, is $295 with no coupon, no discount. Looks like you can get 10% off just by like signing up for the email list. That'll bring you to $260, right? So this is perfect. $260 and $40. Here we are for $300. That guitar's $300. Which would I rather own? Put aside for the second that's a humbucker, and I think that's useful in a way, right? And that this one has a decked set. Just which would I rather own? 100% this sounds better to me. I run into tones on there where I am a little like, okay, it's not the humbucker is a little bright and brash for, compared to like my Sir. The singles sound really good for that price range. And just they sound good in general, but they don't sound as classic Strat. But what these pickups do, these pickups have a little bit of mojo that I really dig in the sense that I can go ambient with these. And I feel this way about all like Lambertone stuff. It's brighter, it's a little clearer. There seems to be like a low mid pull out, like they pulled the low mids out. And it provides this clarity because you're able to do this sort of thing. what these do is a thing that I really appreciate, which is they maintain a sort of clarity that cuts through what I like, which is a darker reverb and a lot of delay trails. And so you get a lot of movement without losing the initial note hit and attack. And that's something that I think you hear in a mix when you want to pull low end and you want to pull like low mid range out of your guitar signal as a whole to clear it up. But it's also something that happens within the guitar sound itself when you have a lot of movement and modulation and stuff. This was hardly the most verb I would use, but you can hear there how this sounds clear through that whole thing. And that's what I think these things do better than probably anything else on the market. But it's a $40 guitar with a $290, $260 pickup set. It really begs the question, like, is the tone in the fingers? Is it in the wood? Now, I'm not a person that's saying wood doesn't matter at all. I'm not saying that, right? I'm not saying that, old wood isn't like, denser and drier and, than new wood. I'm not saying the mass of a guitar doesn't matter. It clearly matters. If you don't believe me, go take any guitar and push the headstock right up against the door jamb in your house, the doorway, any doorway in your house. Push it right up against there and hit the guitar with a cord and then push it up against that thing. Really put pressure and hit it again. And you'll feel there's a lot more vibration. There's a vibration transfer that's noticeable when you add wood to the guitar, when you add mass to the guitar. And now, all mass, I don't know, but at least wood seems to work. I bet if you put concrete attached to your guitar, it might not really resonate any differently. I think in a lot of ways, if we're being honest with ourselves, things like setup and things like the strings and the rough frets and everything, that's more for the player. The sound is mostly in the pickups. I think Jim Lill has some videos that show this. I think other components do make a big difference. But in terms of, if you take, like I always go back to this hamburger thing, right? It's like you can get the McDonald's hamburger, and if you closed your eyes and you took a bite of it, you'd taste it and you'd go, that's a hamburger. You might even know it's from McDonald's. And then you could go to Gordon Ramsay's burger, whatever place, and it'd be the best burger you ever had. And I think there's one in Vegas. And you eat that burger and you go, oh, that's a hamburger. Oh, it's so good. The thing is, without any reference, the two burgers could go from $600 to $6 or $3 to $300. And it's still a burger. Your brain will still identify. It's more like itself and each other than it is some other food group. And I think that's true of guitar. And we pay a ton of money to get, sometimes little differences in guitar. I think right now the difference between, I'll just say it, the difference between these Fesleys and maybe, like the new standard series from Fender that's made in Indonesia, I think. I'd be willing to bet the difference in that guitar at $300 and $699 is not very much. I really would bet that. But you can take something that's absolutely low end. You can put in high end something or other like this, like these Lambertone, I keep wanting to say Ristrettos. Those are the P90s, the triple shots. And you instantly elevate that thing to sound like, a lot of the boutique brands that use these pickups. A lot of the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 guitars that use these pickups. And so, at the end of the day, if you really ask me, is tone in the fingers, is tone in the wood, and is tone in the pickups? I'd say this. I kind of would say tones in the pickups. Now, I also am a believer in tones in the fingers, but your fingers can be sloppy. Your fingers can be slow. Your fingers, no matter what I play with a bunch of reverb on, no matter what I play really, the tone can get lost if the pickups don't have that nice presence, right? No matter what I play on the guitar, the sort of, if it doesn't push the front end right, you know, it's not, if there wasn't a Les Paul, we might not have rock and roll like we have it today. And the fingers are a part of the sound of rock and roll, but there's a reason that humbucker pickup took off in the late 50s, why people started discovering it in the 60s, really. They went back and said, these late 50s pickups are really good. What's going on with those? So I kind of think tone's in the pickups. Just my observation of the day.